This morning, I liked that song that Paul brought second to last, Trust and Obey. And that's, I guess, a little bit about what we're going to be talking about this morning. Also following on from something that Imtiaz spoke last week, and he just mentioned briefly about that passage that we've got in a couple of the Gospels. We're going to look in Mark 12 about the greatest commandments. So that's where we're going to start off this morning, in Mark 12. How are you doing? Are you feeling good? Are you comfortable? Not too comfortable, I hope. Wouldn't want anyone falling asleep on me. So Mark 12, and we are in verses 28 to 31. You guys, you know these verses. But isn't it amazing that every time you read something in Scripture, it always seems to come out in a new way? And that's why it says that the word is alive, and it's living, and it's active, and it can speak to us something new today that we hadn't seen, even if we've read this verse 1,000 times. So let's have faith that that will happen this morning. One of the teachers of the law came and heard them debating. Noticing that Jesus had given them a good answer, he asked him, "Of all the commandments, which is the most important?" "The most important one," answered Jesus, "is this: Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind and with all your strength. And the second is like this: love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these." And so what were they talking about at this moment in time? What were they talking about? That's not a rhetorical question. There will be real questions today, not just rhetorical questions. What were they talking about at that moment in time? God's commandments. Thank you, Helen. They were talking about God's commandments. It says as one of the teachers of the law came up. And so they're talking about those commandments, those instructions that God had given to the people of Israel. And as they were starting out as an independent, free nation, having been lost in slavery for 400 years, God, through Moses, speaks to them as they're coming into their freedom as a free, independent nation. And he gives them this wonderful instruction that we find there in Exodus and Leviticus and Deuteronomy, what is called the law, and central to the law being the 10 Commandments. And the law is constant. I want you to think about that this morning. That's important. The law is constant. If you think in nature, for example, I don't know if you guys did physics lessons at school. Do you remember your physics lessons at school? And there were these things called laws. And laws are things that are constant, like Isaac Newton. What did Isaac Newton say? Pretty much he said, what goes up must come down. For example, I don't think he put it quite that way, but it was something similar. I had an A-level in physics. You wouldn't tell today, would you? But anyway. They are laws. They are constants. They are reliable. They are unchanging. They are unconditional. And so, reflecting on his own character and nature, God's laws are also constant and unchanging and reliable and unconditional. And that's an important thing for us to remember. God's laws are constant. Let's change tack. It's New Year. Woohoo! Psh, fireworks. Bang! It's a new decade. I didn't kind of even sort of catch hold of that idea until people started sort of flagging things up on social media. It's a new decade. I'm like, oh yeah, you're right, it is. We're not in the 2010s anymore, we're in the 2020s. We're in the 20s. It's slightly different to the 1920s, but it's a new decade. And so the question is, and the question that people have been asking, what are we likely to experience in this new decade? What are we likely to experience in this year? And we could think about some of the things that might be going on. One thing that's certain that you will find in this year and this decade is this: change. Change. There was this Greek philosopher, I'm going to pronounce his name right because I didn't have an A-level in Greek, but Heraclitus, is that about right, Ian? Heraclitus? Yeah, I don't know. Heraclitus, let's call him Heraclitus. 500 years before Jesus, he said this. He said, the only constant in life is change. The only constant in life is change. Now, of course, he said that because he didn't know God. If he had known God, he would have said that the only constants in life are change and God. But he didn't know God. And in fact, the Greek gods that they had at that time were pretty erratic. If you ever read some of those Greek stories, and kind of they talk about their gods or their ideas of gods, and they're really erratic characters, as erratic as human beings. He didn't know the real true God. But he did have a point in what he said, that a constant thing in life is change. Seasons are one obvious example to us. Constant change in nature that we see. Even looking out of these windows Sunday after Sunday, as we're contemplating the wonder and beauty of God's creation, we can see how it changes through the seasons. You see new growth. And growth is part of change. We may not notice it day after day. For instance, if we're looking at our children or our grandchildren, they are growing, they are changing. The opposite of that, death, is also a process of change. And again, we see that in nature. In the winter where the leaves fall off the trees and they sort of die back. And so in nature, in politics, in culture, we see all sorts of changes happening. Someone mentioned Brexit this morning. It's change. And we're not quite sure how it's going to all work out. Your employment situation this year might change for those who are employed. Your family situation might change. Your economic circumstances can change. All of these things. Even for our kids, when I take Joshie and Danny to school, every September they have a new teacher, they have a change of their classroom, a change of their timetables, and they have to get used to the idea that things change. In church, hang on a minute, this could be delicate. There may be change. Sometimes we bring in a new song. It's a change. Sometimes we have a different form of teaching on a Sunday morning. Change. There was a suggestion recently that we can even sacrifice a Sunday morning meeting, like a normal Sunday morning meeting, in favor of some kind of outreach event. Interesting. But it's a change. We know that at some point this year, as church, there's going to be a massive change. As the minister who's been here for over 20 years is due to walk into retirement and the next chapter of his life. It's change. And change can be difficult. In the corporate world, they have even positions in companies called change managers. It's an actual profession to be a manager of change because it's been recognized that change is so complex within companies, within organizations, that you have to have a certain special set of skills to be able to help people to deal with it. It's not easy for us. We all long for security. We long for certainty. We long to be sure about things. And so when we see change around us and we feel change is happening on our very doorstep, it can be difficult to manage emotionally, psychologically. And so that's why it's so important to remember always that our Father God is unchanging, that he is certain, he is reliable, he is sure, he is faithful. That wonderful word that the Bible uses continually, God is faithful. He doesn't change. Again, talking about Moses. And Moses, a man who experienced a lot of change in his life, from being brought up as a prince there in Egyptian palaces, and then having to go on the run, became a fugitive, an exile, and became a shepherd. And when God spoke to Moses, and he revealed himself to Moses, and he told Moses what his name was, and he said, I am the great I am. The great I am. Doesn't change. Is the same forever, from eternity past through the present to eternity future. Again, we spoke of Psalms this morning. Hilly, it was read from Psalms. King David, in several of the Psalms, says that God is his rock. God is his rock. In Psalm 40, verse 2, it says, he is a firm place to stand. And the writer to the Hebrews, in Hebrews 13, says the same thing about Jesus. He says, Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And so we have that certainty. We can have the confidence. God does not change. His love does not change. His care for us does not change. His purposes for us, they do not change. Because he does not change. And in the same way, his law is constant, and we should seek to make God's law a constant in our lives. We talked about the 10 Commandments. And did the 10 Commandments come with conditions attached? Sorry, that's not a rhetorical, that's a real question. Did the 10 Commandments come with any conditions attached to them? Like, oh yeah, you need to obey these commandments only as long as certain circumstances apply. They didn't, did they? The 10 Commandments were pretty clear-cut. You know, they didn't say, oh, don't commit adultery. Oh, unless you both really, really love each other, then it's all right. Didn't say that, did it? It didn't say, honor your father and your mother as long as you feel that they've been good parents to you. Didn't say that. It said, honor your father and your mother. So there weren't any conditions. They're unchanging laws, applicable 24 hours of the day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, all the time. I know you can have a day off then, Helen, if you like. You can just do what you like. Every single day. Like the Jews had a different calendar anyway, didn't they? So they possibly, you know. Or did they say that a year would have 365 days? I don't think they did they? Because the months even were different. So that's right, they had leap months, didn't they? It's interesting. Anyway. But the most important laws, according to Jesus, okay, you need to pay attention to this guy. The most important laws were these that we just read at the beginning. Love God and love people. Always. Because they're laws and they're constant. Love God and love people. Whatever the circumstances, whatever life throws at you, whatever comes your way, you've got to keep on loving God and loving people. Are we getting this? Yeah? I know this is basics, but it's important to remember. Because when change comes your way, you need to know what it is that you are supposed to keep on doing, despite any crazy changes that might happen. You know, like Joseph, you could get falsely accused and thrown into prison next month. But in that place, what have you got to do? What two things you've got to remember that you need to do? Keep on loving God and loving people. Whatever the change is. You know, it's a bit like test cricket. I'm going to need your help, George. George, come up, please. I know you're a cricketer. Yeah, George, I know there's a few cricketers in the audience today. I'm happy about that, you see. That's why we can stay down here. There's more space, you see. Now, in test cricket, you know, you can bowl. Oh. Can't catch. Okay. I don't know how many people follow cricket. Do you follow cricket at all? Some people do. You know, it depends, doesn't it? You know, if we're doing well, I'm one of those. If we're doing well, I'll follow it. If we're doing badly, I won't even go there. You know what I mean? It's just too depressing. But they teach a test batsman, whatever happens, you've just got to keep doing your own thing. You've got to do your own thing. It doesn't matter what kind of ball they bowl at you, you just keep on doing your own thing. And most of the time in test cricket, it's that, isn't it? Isn't it, Richard? It's that. Yeah. You know, you see. You know, and if you see a ball that you think, oh, hang on a minute, that doesn't look quite so dangerous, you might kind of like try and waft it somewhere. You know, that is the essence of test cricket if you're not into that sort of thing. And so the bowlers, on the other hand, they've got all kinds of different sorts of deliveries. They call them deliveries. You know, a bit like, I don't know, UPS or something. Different kinds of deliveries that they will try to bowl at you to get you out. Okay, so there's a delivery called like an in-swing. Yeah, so what's in-swing, George? Okay, so it kind of starts off in one direction and then sort of heads back in. Go on, let's try going in. Yeah. So with that ball, I ain't going to swing it anyway, that's for sure. What else is it? So on the other side to in-swing, you've got outswinger. Okay, we're not going to try that. Okay, what about a bouncer? Go on, give me a bouncer, George. Okay, what's a bouncer all about? Going from ahead. How do they go for the head? They go on in. Go on, give it a go. Oh, go on, give it a go. Go on. It's only a tennis ball. Go on. Bouncer. Oh, my goodness me. It's brutal. A bouncer, they're kind of aiming at your head with a hard cricket ball at nearly 100 miles an hour. Okay, what about a Yorker? What's a Yorker all about? Well, right at my feet, so I kind of like almost sort of tripping over it, trying to kind of get, yeah. Go on in. Oh, there's a bit of leg there. Thank you, Harry, in the field. I think there's a bit of leg, but I heard a clip of the bat there. That's it. Okay, so all the time while George is trying to get me out with these deliveries, what do I, as the batsman, need to keep on doing? Just eye on the ball and just keep on doing my thing. Keep on doing my thing. You know, go bowl a couple, go on. Just, yeah, whatever. Full toss. Oh, a spinner. We're talking about spinner now. Yeah, just keeping it away. Where's it gone? Was there a shout? We haven't got 9 slips today. And there's a thing called, there's a flipper. What's a flipper all about? Do you know what a flipper is? What's a flipper? Kind of like bring your hand over and round and... A googly. Yeah, what about a wrong'un? What's a wrong'un? Like a googly. Okay, that's clear, isn't it? A googly is like a wrong'un. Or wrong'un is like a googly. Okay, and so I'm so glad that's clear. And so all the time, the batsman needs to just keep on doing his thing. Doing his thing. Just keep it there, doing his thing. You know, it doesn't matter what the bowler's bowling. He's just doing his own thing. If he thinks that it's coming on towards his stumps and he's going to get him out, well, just block it, just defend it. And if he thinks that, oh, actually, this is a bad ball, it's not going anywhere near my stumps, I can smack it for 6. If you're Ben Stokes. Thank you, George. You've been very helpful. Yes, give him a round of applause. I think he deserves it. You see, you keep on doing your thing. Whatever happens in life, whatever life throws at you, you keep on doing what it is that you know you've got to be doing. You're loving God and you're loving people. Loving God and loving people. Loving God and loving people. Paul and Silas, they were wrongly accused and thrown into jail. What did they do in that place? Love God. What did they do in jail? They praised God. They sang songs and hymns of worship to God and they prayed. They loved God. The fact that they were in a stinky old dungeon didn't make any difference to that. And then what did they do? It's remarkable. You know, you have this whole story. The jail kind of like just falls apart completely. And their first concern was for who? Sorry? The jailer. Their first concern was for the jailer because they knew that the jailer knew that if they escaped, he was a dead man. So their first concern was for the jailer. And they said, don't worry, mate. No one's gone anywhere. You see how they were loving the jailer, even in the midst of that whole situation, loving God and loving people. Again, King David. You know, David had become a celebrated, victorious warrior through defeating Goliath and other battles that took place. He'd been living in the palace for a while, but then there was a change. And that change was that King Saul became jealous. King Saul didn't like that David was getting all the attention. And so he started to persecute David. And he persecuted David so much that David had to run off into exile just to get away from that place. And even in exile, he kept on loving God and loving people. And people gathered around him. And so he loved and served the people that he was with, even though he was in exile. And it was only once God had dealt with Saul that then David could come back. And even then, even with Saul, David even loved and respected Saul. And he said, I'm not going to kill this guy. I'm not going to finish him off, even though I've got the opportunity. Because that's not what God wants. It's interesting. Nehemiah had a bit more of a positive change happen one year. Because he'd been serving in the palace up in Babylonia. So he'd been a servant. And then suddenly, through a series of different events, Nehemiah became what? He became governor there in Jerusalem. So he's had a job promotion. He's gone from being a servant in Babylon to being a governor in Jerusalem. Wow, fantastic, wonderful job promotion. You know, how many people this year are praying, God, I need a job promotion? Yeah? And so it was a positive change. And yet, even through that positive change in his life, he kept on doing his thing, loving God and loving people. He didn't allow himself to become distracted or corrupted by his newfound authority. But he kept on loving God and loving people all through. And so again, kind of like the first important point for this morning is this: whatever happens this year, whatever happens, and I'm preaching this as much to myself as to anyone else, keep on doing your thing, and your thing is to love God and to love people, whatever happens. Love God, love people, whatever happens. Is that good? Good. Because we need to remember. Now, what does it look like to love God? We all know it, we can all say it, we can all sing it. But what does it look like in real life to love God? Pen, lid off, answers please. What does it look like in real life to love God? Obey. Worship. Automatic turn. So acknowledging him in all your ways. About this. Again, the Ten Commandments give a few suggestions, if you can call them that. Don't hold anything in this life as more important to you than your relationship with God. Don't hold anything in life more important to you than your relationship with God. Don't misrepresent God to other people. That's interesting. Ron used that word when he was praying this morning about not misrepresenting. So don't misrepresent God to other people. Don't say, oh, God says this when he doesn't. Or God says that when he doesn't. Or don't say, oh, yeah. I believe in God. I'm a Christian. And yet kind of your lifestyle is not really reflecting the God who you say that you serve. It's tough, And then there's one of the commandments there. It talks about the Sabbath. And there are different ways that different people have interpreted that. But it is very, very clear that any way that you interpret law about the Sabbath, that it is crucial, vital. You can't do without separating out time. Separating out time from your schedule to spend at rest with him. Crucial. Now, whether you do that on a Saturday, on a Sunday, on a Wednesday, or any day of the week. But the crucial thing is that, to separate out time to spend at rest and with him. Because love takes time, doesn't it? Love takes time to form, between two people. Love takes time. And so it's important that we make that time to be able to have in prayer, in conversation with God. Let him speak into our lives. We commit ourselves seriously to this because this is God speaking to us. We commit ourselves seriously to it so that we can understand more about who he is and who we are and what life in him is supposed to be all about. And so to be able to do that, that may be a sacrifice. You may have to put aside one way of spending your time to be able to make more time, because you can't make time. That's the funny thing, isn't it? You can't make time. Time just is. You can decide what you do with the time that you've got. And so each one of us have to decide what to do with the time that we've got. And so that is another challenge for this year. And so that second thing we talked about, loving God and loving people. The Apostle John said this. He said, whoever does not love their brother and sister whom they have seen cannot love God whom they have not seen. And so there is that secondary challenge, you see. And Jesus stuck that second command so closely on the back of the first. Love God and love people. And that's the most important thing there is. And so what does loving people look like in real life? Pen out, lid off, over to you. What does loving people look like in real life? Maintain peace. Okay, Martha, what did you say? sharing the gospel. Did you read my notes? Listening. Yeah, some people, they just need someone that will hear them, someone who's going to listen to them. You know, loneliness is a huge thing in our time. So, pray for people. Yep. Sorry? Practically help them. So if you see someone who's got a practical need, then actually getting stuck in and helping them out in a practical way, totally. Again, the 10 Commandments provide a sort of a bit of a base. Honor your parents. Don't murder. That's kind of important. Don't murder anyone. Don't steal, don't lie, don't commit adultery, don't envy. What else? Forgiveness is part of loving people. If someone does something wrong to us, in our perspective, forgiveness is part of loving them and loving God. Generosity, encouraging people, supporting them, giving, serving, again, as Anthony said. All of these are instructions that we will find in God's word, and particularly looking at the life of Jesus. Now, Jesus provides the model for what it means for a human being to really, really love other people. You want to know what it means to love other people? Do what Jesus did. Because in fact, to be a Christian, that term actually means what? What does Christian actually mean? Ian? Christ-like? Yeah, Christ-like. I mean, follower of Christ. Little Christ. It means to be a little Christ. And so he is our model. You know, we need to start becoming more intentional, or as intentional about engaging with other people as Jesus did. I really remembered that Danny was preaching a few months ago, and he was speaking about the guy who was demon-possessed over in Gadara on the other side of the lake. And Jesus, after a night of prayer, went out and he crossed a stormy lake just to find that one man who needed to be rescued. He crossed a stormy lake to go and find one man who needed to be set free, who needed to know God's love in his life. George Verwer spoke about getting out of the comfort zone. I read this book when I was a teenager. I think I picked it up, started reading it, and I finished it in one go. It was so good. But just the title, Out of the Comfort Zone. You know, we need to get out of our comfort zone. The place that we feel safe. Perhaps that means kind of stepping out of our little group here. Our group of people that we feel comfortable with because we've gotten to know each other a little bit being here. And we're called to step out even further. Yes, the Bible does say that we should love one another. I'm not saying no to that, because definitely yes. We love each other as church, as community, as family here in this place. But we are also called to step out of our comfort and our comfort zone. And go, and as Martha said, go and share the gospel. You know, we say we love God. And Jesus said, well, you know, if you love me, do as I command. And what was Jesus' last command to his disciples? Go and make disciples. Go and make disciples. And it is so clear. It's actually in all 5 of the Gospels. It talks about going and being witnesses, going and making disciples, going and sharing the good news to all of creation. Because there are people outside of this place, in the worlds that we inhabit, that desperately, desperately need to hear the gospel message. They desperately need to respond to the Lord's invitation to be rescued, to receive his love for now and for eternity. And if we love God, we can't turn a blind eye to that. And so that's the second important challenge. And again, it's for myself. It's something that I know God has been speaking to me over and over and over. It's about, whatever happens, whatever else life might look like, go and make disciples. Go and make disciples. And I want to leave that challenge with you for this year as well, to go and make disciples. And maybe that's something that we might recognize that we need to learn how to do better. I know that I do. And I've had the advantage of the last couple of months through a friend of mine. And he's been sort of sharing with me some thoughts about how to become a better disciple who makes other disciples. And I'm hoping that within the next couple of months, and we're going to be able to bring him to this church to come and speak to us and share with us some of those tools, because I've been really impressed by what he's said. And so watch this space. I'm hoping that's something we're going to be able to do very, very soon. But it starts with going out, okay? It starts with going out and sowing. I'm going to finish with this. The parable of the sower has been something that, again, I've been thinking about so much lately. And you guys, you'll know the parable of the sower. And it says, what does the parable of the sower say? Do you remember? Yeah, there was this farmer. And what does he do? What does the farmer do? Sorry? He sows, but before he sows, what does he do? Thank you, Jenny. It says, a farmer went out. A farmer went out. So he didn't start sowing seeds in his house. It would be a bit pointless. He went out. He went out to the field. He went out to the place that was his to sow seeds. And then what does it say? After he went out, he what? He was probably plowed previously to that, yeah. It says he sowed seeds. But it doesn't say he sowed. Do you know what it says he did? He scattered. He scattered seeds. Sorry, Jill, I will hoover that up. He scattered seeds. He scattered. Because I think so often, as, we've kind of thought about our planting the gospel and gospel sharing, and kind of often we get very, very specific and we say, look, I'm kind of going to plant. And kind of like we plant in specific places and at specific times. But let's be true, we probably plant less than we should. I think the main message behind the parable of the sower is this: he scattered. He scattered. Why? So I'll hoover it, don't worry. You're going to come back in like a year's time and it'll be sprouting up. That'll be great. But he scattered. Why? Because that farmer knew that only 1/4 of his land, well, it doesn't even say that, we kind of assume that. The farmer knew that only part of his field was good soil. And so if he wanted to see a crop, if he wanted to see a harvest, he's going to have to scatter a lot. He's going to have to go out and he's going to have to scatter. He's going to have to spread seed all over the place. Everywhere. He's going to have to just get out and chuck it around. And yeah, okay, some of that seed is not going to bear fruit. But some of that seed will bear fruit. And it is worth doing that job because of the seed that bears fruit and comes and produces a harvest. So again, that's part of the challenge. Has become people who go out and don't just sow, but actually we start to scatter God's truth, God's life, little gems, little nuggets of divine love wherever we go, out in the fields. So again, that's another challenge for this year, and I will leave it at that. Probably gone on too long. I think possibly the cricket went on too long. As usual, I was going to say, a lot of people would say that all the time about cricket. Oh, especially the South Africans. Oh no, we don't want 5 days. So anyway, so that's kind of what I wanted to encourage you guys with this morning. You know, we keep on doing our thing, whatever this year throws at us. Loving God and loving people. Yeah? You could go and get a tattoo of it if you want. No, don't. Love God and love people. And particularly in loving people, think about becoming a disciple who makes disciples. And that's something, again, like I said, that we're going to look more at this year. Because I think that is the challenge that we've been called to. And as we do that, we will see this church being built. Jesus will build his church. And we will have been part of that. But not as architects, as laborers doing what he's called us to do. Amen?